Hi, this is Josh Scherrer, and today I'm going to read to you an excerpt from my book, 2020, The Journal of a Man Faced with Humanity's Downfall. I'll be reading the chapter entitled May. May 4th, 2020, Boonville, Indiana. I'm faltering on my self-imposed duty to record the events that have taken place in my life. Over a week has slipped by since I last wrote. Much has happened in that time. Thankfully, the rain subsided before the watershed ripped away the fencing around the house or affected any of the buildings in the yard. The remaining runoff still snakes muddily through the adjoining field down to the creek that leads out to the river. Except for the screams we heard the night of April 24th, there had been little evidence of the outbreak around here until 4 nights ago when the generator stopped working. We have been using it during the day to draw up water from the well, and then at night we use it to power the electric stove so that we have a warm meal to eat. I figured it must have been out of fuel, and without thinking, I ran out to the garage to grab the gas can to fill the generator's tank. As I closed the garage door on my way out, I heard the popping of sheet metal from above. Wheeling around, I caught sight of a massive shadow scampering across the slanted roof. I dropped the gas can and took off in a sprint toward the house. I heard the metallic pop stop and the heavy, squishy thud of something hitting the rain-soaked ground. Glancing over my shoulder, I could see a figure rise and take off after me. There's not much distance between the garage and the sliding glass door to the house, but I was afraid I wasn't going to make it. Suddenly, the glass door in front of me slid open, and my father appeared in the doorway, his Winchester pump shotgun pointed directly at me. "Duck!" he yelled. I immediately dropped to the concrete, scraping my arms against the gritty surface. As soon as I dropped below his line of sight, my father blasted the figure chasing me. With an agonizing groan, the figure collapsed. My father grabbed a flashlight off the kitchen table and came outside. Helping me to my feet, he gave me a look and then turned his attention to what he had just shot. Dead on the ground was a man, though his yellowed, pasty skin, bathed in the glow of the flashlight, indicated he must have been infected. He reminded me of the man I killed in Owensboro. Shining the light on his face, his eyes were rolled back, his pupils pointing nearly to the back of his head, but I could still see the cloudy haze in the whites of his dead eyes, again just like the other man. I noticed the beam dancing slightly on the corpse. My father trembled slightly. I said nothing. This must have been the first person he's ever killed. I headed back inside to leave Dad with his thoughts. I knew exactly what he was feeling. May 5th, 2020, Boonville, Indiana. After last night's attack, we had the unpleasant task of getting the body out of the yard. I stressed my concern about getting so close to the body, but we decided that just leaving it there to decompose would be even worse. Dad found some old full-body rain suits in the garage to use as hazard suits while we carefully pushed the corpse onto a sheet before dragging it into a pit outside the fence that we had dug before we started. That nasty chore complete, Dad and I then discussed how we were going to protect ourselves from future assaults. Obviously, going outside after dark is not advisable, but from the busted windows and broken doors I observed in Owensboro, the infected do not hesitate to enter houses, I assume in search of nourishment. In their altered state, if that nourishment happens to be another human, then that's what they go after. I don't believe they're attacking just to kill. We decided that in addition to reinforcing and raising the height of the fence around the house, we needed to start patrolling the rest of the property in the hopes of either scaring off or eliminating any other infected people that might be lurking in the shadows. Mom wasn't too keen on the idea of us walking around trying to shoo away these people, but we eventually convinced her it was for the best. Now we just have to convince ourselves. May 6th, 2020, Boonville, Indiana. We've had great weather this week, which we hope will continue, and made quick progress on the fencing around the house. We've not started actively patrolling yet, but last night Dad and I did climb onto the roof of the house and used his night vision rangefinder to try and see anything. We spotted at least 5 infected people wandering on the neighbor's property east of the house. Dad said that the neighbors were gone, so there was no need to take any action. Dad and I started calling the infected we see night roamers because of their characteristic stumbling, searching gait. Although we both witnessed them during the day, the Randolphs Dad saw earlier and the man I killed at the Carsons, we chose to call them night roamers because they are more active when it's dark. As soon as the fence is complete, we think Mom will be safe enough to stay indoors alone while we patrol. Tonight we're going up on the roof again to observe the night roamer movements. May 7th, 2020, Boonville, Indiana. Last night we hooked up a spotlight Dad found in the shed to an adapter and we plugged it into the generator. It's a good thing that we did because around 10 o'clock we spotted 7 night roamers between the woods and the fence surrounding the house. I had my 30-06 with me, and using the bright moonlight to see my iron sights, I was able to gun down 4 of them before the other 3 took off into the woods. After being attacked 3 times by infected people, I found it much easier to swallow my reservations about shooting another human being. I barely thought about it as I pulled the trigger time and time again. This morning, Dad and I buried the bodies, careful not to touch them. We don't want their rotting carcasses sitting out, but we also don't want to get infected when we dispose of them. If we're going to start killing the infected so close to the house, we thought about burning them when possible. Of course, we also run the risk that breathing in the fumes might be just as bad, or worse. We worked on the fence the rest of the day and finished it up right before supper. Mom has agreed to let us go out on a patrol as long as we stick together. Dad gave her his antique Webley .32 revolver for protection while we're gone. I thought she might be hesitant, but she kind of just shrugged her shoulders. I think she's tired of being trapped in her own home. The plan is to head out around 9 and patrol on foot. We hope to cover the entire perimeter of the property by midnight. We're both carrying machetes and hunting knives. I have my revolver. Dad is carrying his 7.65mm Scorpion. I'm also carrying my hunting rifle, while Dad is carrying his Winchester shotgun. Our mission is to secure the perimeter and eliminate any night roamers we encounter. I struggle somewhat knowing we are now actively pursuing and shooting fellow human beings. Sitting on the roof and killing diseased wild people who threaten to breach the fence is one thing, but going out and hunting them is different. I've resigned myself to just believe that these are desperate times. We can't allow ourselves to be overrun because if we do, we'll end up like the Carsons. May God forgive us for what we are about to do. May 8th, 2020, Boonville, Indiana. The patrol took longer than expected. We didn't get back to the house until nearly 2 in the morning. Of course, when we returned, Mom was fast asleep, oblivious to our arrival. Luckily for her, we were not night roamers. She didn't even have the Webley in the same room where she was sleeping. As far as the patrol went, it was eventful to say the least. We didn't spot anything unusual until we got to the north side of the property, which borders a subdivision. As we approached, we could smell the distinct aroma of burnt wood mixed with the sickening smell of bloated and decaying carcasses. We couldn't see a whole lot as the moonlight barely broke through the thick clouds overhead, but we could make out the charred remnants of at least 3 houses, as well as movements. Lots of movement. We're guessing what we saw were night roamers, though none of them got close enough for us to actually see for sure. Severely outnumbered, we quietly retreated from the area. We'll have to figure out a way to secure the subdivision if we want to feel safe at night. Judging by the amount of movement we saw, we could be easily overrun in our own home. The only other action we encountered was near the road. As we walked down the driveway, we made out the shapes of 12 night roamers standing in the open near the road. We took cover in the ditch next to the drive, shined our flashlights on the crowd, and opened fire. We shot 6 before they even reacted. The remaining roamers started quickly toward us, grunting and wailing loudly. Without the moonlight to aid me, it was difficult to track a moving target. Dad sprayed into the remaining 6 with the scorpion. 2 roamers fell to the ground, dead. The other 4 kept coming at us. I switched to my revolver and fired, but it was too hard to see in the darkness. I started to panic and urged my father to retreat. He ignored my pleas, instead reaching into the backpack he had been carrying. He pulled out a glass bottle filled with a dark liquid. A makeshift cloth fuse stuck out the top. Then pulled a lighter out of his pocket and lit the cloth. He tossed the bottle toward the 4 night roamers, the glass exploding as it hit the ground, liquid fire splashing on the roamers. Their tattered clothes caught almost immediately as they screamed madly, flailing their arms, trying to rip the clothes from their cooking flesh. Collapsing to the driveway, their bodies popped and sizzled as the fire consumed them. My father grinned crazily. "Molotov cocktail," he quipped, and said nothing more. After making sure the area was secure, we ended our patrol. I've learned 3 things from last night's patrol. 1, my father is not going to leave this world quietly. I'm curious to see what other homemade concoctions he has developed. 2, if we are going to go on night patrols, I'm going to need a laser sight or night vision, or both. Finally, I learned how soldiers survive during war. You do not think, you just do. May 10th, 2020, Boonville, Indiana. Still exhausted from our first patrol the previous night, Dad and I didn't patrol last night. Instead, we retired to bed early so that we could head out this morning. We're going to attempt to get into town. We debated whether or not we should take Mom along. We are leery of leaving her home alone, not only because of the roamers, but remembering the miscreants I encountered on the Blue Bridge. We're concerned about unwelcomed visitors as well. On the flip side, of course, is the fact that we have no idea what to expect once we get inside Boonville's city limits. We might be pleasantly surprised and find a few vestiges of civilization, or we might find 15,000 infected souls all searching madly for food. Mom assured us she would be fine by herself and promised not to fall asleep until we returned. Judging from her fuzzy purple slipper socks and floral quilt she snuggled against on her couch, I wasn't sure if I believed her. But we can't afford not to go to town. We are running low on fuel for the generator and other essentials. The small garden we planted last week won't provide us with any food for at least another month, and the wildlife has all but disappeared with the presence of the roamers. We need food. May 11th, 2020, Boonville, Indiana. What used to take less than a day to accomplish now takes 2. Dad and I left 2 days ago around 9 in the morning to acquire supplies. We considered taking 2 vehicles, but I couldn't get my ancient Dodge to start. Not too surprising since I haven't driven it since arriving last month. We threw the empty gas cans and cardboard boxes from the truck into the back of Dad's 2011 Toyota Tacoma. We grabbed some extra ammunition for our firearms and then headed out. There aren't many houses on Wyandotte, but the few that we saw all looked empty. A couple houses still had cars in the driveway. Their front doors were wide open. The house on the hill that sits just off the big bend in the road was completely burned down. Fields line most of Wyandotte, and by this time of year, they've usually been sown with soybeans or corn. As we drove up to Pikeville Road, though, the field sat empty and barren, save the scraggly weeds that have started to overtake the previously cultivated stretches of land. The stretch of Pikeville Road we drive to get to Boonville usually takes about 10 minutes to traverse. Apparently, at some point since the outbreak began, some individual or individuals attempted to barricade the road. We had to make our way around downed trees, piles of debris, and abandoned vehicles. We finally reached the outskirts of town 45 minutes later. As we turned onto Hudson, which becomes Main Street once you get to the town square, we saw a pack of roamers moving freely in and out of the Clearwater nursing home near the gas station. Dad slowed to a stop in front of the home and watched the roamers. Some were obviously younger, maybe in their late teens or early 20s. Others looked older, that was a bit hard to tell. There were none that looked over 60. We had a suspicion as to what happened to the elderly. Without saying a word, Dad turned his attention back to the road and moved on. We decided it was too risky to use the gas station next to the nursing home, so we continued on into town. About a mile down the road, we pulled into Macy's Mart, which is a full-service convenience store and gas station. At one point in time, Macy's Mart even served pizza from scratch. You wouldn't think it would have been very good, coming from a convenience store and all, but surprisingly, it was quite tasty. Of course, the store was abandoned, so there would be no pizza. Anyway, we tried the pumps, but there was no electricity to run the pump. My father rummaged around in the pile of junk he had thrown into the back seat. He pulled out a garden hose. "Grab a wrench, will you?" he asked as he dragged the hose out onto the concrete. I found a large plumber's wrench in the toolbox Dad keeps in the bed of the truck. He searched around the pumps until he found the covers to the underground reservoirs. "Open the red one," he instructed. "They should be color-coded to match the different octanes at the pump. The red one is what we need." I kneeled down and worked the bolts free. Taking the blade of my hunting knife, I popped the cover from its seal, and sliding it aside, I began feeding the garden hose down into the storage tank. "You think this will be enough?" I asked. Dad shrugged his shoulders. "I don't know. I've never stolen gas like this before," he replied. "Hold the hose. I'm going to go get some cans." Dad hurried off and then came back carrying 3 of the 6 cans we brought with us. I lowered the hose as far as I could, leaving enough length to reach the cans. "Here goes nothing," I commented. I placed my lips around the end of the hose and started sucking the air out of the tube, trying to create a vacuum to draw the gasoline up. I was unsure whether or not the other end of the hose was actually reaching the fuel supply, but after a few seconds of drawing air up, the awful taste of gasoline filled my mouth. Spitting it out, I stuck the hose into the nearest can. The spray of gas splattered into the can. After several minutes, we had filled the Tacoma's tank with the gas cans and refilled the cans to use on the generator. As I was lifting the hose out of the reservoir, I caught sight of movement out of the corner of my eye. I jumped to my feet, flinging the hose aside and pulling my revolver from its holster. I scanned the area in front of me. The movement was coming from the dumpsters. I drew back the hammer. As the hammer clicked into place, a scrawny female roamer jumped out from behind the dumpster. I fired immediately, wounding her in the left leg. She let out a scream as she toppled over. She started dragging herself across the concrete, leaving an oozy trail of black blood. Coldly, I approached her as she struggled to get away. When I got within 10 feet of her, I aimed at the back of her head and pulled the trigger. Her skull split open as the bullet shattered her bone and fragmented, the lead bouncing back into her face as the pieces ricocheted off the concrete. I stood over her body for a moment before realizing what I had done. My whole body shuddered. The roamer had not attacked me, and clearly she was not on our property. Why did I shoot her? I tried to convince myself that I shot her out of fear when she jumped from her hiding place. But did I really just execute her as she crawled helplessly away? As I write this, I am reliving the scene over and over in my mind. I thought I could handle killing so long as I thought I was defending our home or our lives. The woman I killed was assaulting neither. I do not like the person I am becoming. At the time, though, I did not have the time to think about what I had just done, as Dad hollered for me to grab the hose and get back to the truck. As he did so, he opened fire. Running to the truck, I saw what he was firing at. At least 30 roamers were crossing the vacant lot between Macy's Mart and Boonville Community Hospital. We drove dove into the truck, and took off as the roamers reached the pumps. We did not speak about what I had just done. Instead, Dad commented that we would need to travel to the Walmart on the west side of town. There, we might be able to find enough supplies to last a few months. As it turns out, he was right. We did find enough supplies to last a few months, but we had to fight to get to them. When we got to the store, the parking lot was mostly empty. There were a few vehicles with the remains of their unlucky owners lying on the ground nearby. A handful of other vehicles were broken into, burned, or simply locked up and abandoned. We did a quick sweep of the lot to make sure there wasn't a large pack of roamers waiting to attack. Finding none, we parked close to the lawn and garden center. The putrid stench coming from the building overwhelmed us at first. The fresh and frozen food that had been sitting without electricity to preserve it since sometime in early April. We agreed that if there were roamers in the building, they would probably be searching for food. If we entered near the grocery side, we wouldn't have much chance to find cover before they spotted us. If we went in from the opposite side of the building, though, we should be able to approach any roamers from a distance and neutralize them before they became a threat. It turned out to be a pretty good plan. Sure enough, as we moved past the electronics section, we saw 4 roamers fighting over a bag of pre-cooked chicken wings that had thawed and rotted after the power went out. We took them out quickly with a single bullet to the head. We grabbed a shopping cart as we approached and devised a plan. One of us would run the aisles, grabbing pre-selected items that we needed. The other would provide covering fire as needed. I volunteered to run the aisles. I grabbed canned vegetables, fruit, and soups. I took as much dried pasta as I could fit into the cart, because black and white mold covered the fresh breads. A few roamers approached me as I ran the aisles, but Dad eliminated them quickly. As we made our way out of the grocery section, we stopped and grabbed another cart, filling it with medicine and other supplies. By the time we loaded up our goods, the sun started slipping beneath the horizon. Feeling it too dangerous to travel at night, we drove across the street to the Chevrolet dealership. Dusty 2020 models sat in the lot, untouched. We chose the dealership to hunker down for the night because the showroom's relatively small size. It would be easy to defend during an attack. We busted the lock on the showroom door and barricaded ourselves into a windowless room in the back. We slept in 2-hour shifts. I could hear the distinctive screams and howls of the night roamers, some of which were just outside the building. We ventured out at 7 after the sun was in the sky. There were no signs of roamers. Since we were already on the west end of town, Dad and I decided to venture to the Goose Creek Outfitters just past Walmart. The place was abandoned, and we stocked up on ammunition and grabbed a few more firearms. I also took some winter camouflage. I only had a few warmer pieces of clothing, and although we were entering the summer months, with any luck, I will still be around this winter, and I will need something to wear. I also grabbed a night vision scope for my hunting rifle and a laser sight for my revolver. We would have taken more, but the Tacoma was packed tight. The return trip to the house took the rest of the day, though we didn't run into any trouble. The roads were just difficult, and we had to travel slowly. Dad is trying to get some sleep before we resume our patrol of the property tonight. Armed with new sights, I'm ready to face the darkness. May 12th, 2020, Boonville, Indiana. On our patrol last night, we observed an even larger number of roamers in the subdivision to the north. I don't know what food source is keeping them there or why they seem to mass in one area, but I'm starting to realize that this could quickly get out of hand if we don't take preemptive action against them. As I write this, I realize what I'm suggesting. Mass murder, premeditated killing in cold blood. We justify our actions calling the roamers animals and less than human, but they kill for food. We kill to not be killed. I'm not sure who has the greater sin, but my money isn't on us for keeping the moral high ground. And yet tonight we are going to go out and gun down as many roamers as we possibly can. We're going to do our best to wipe them out, drive them from the area, and remove the threat to our existence. I remember how I felt when I had to kill Mr. Harrison, and I wish I could at least feel a tenth of that guilt now. Instead, I am cold. I want to remove every last roamer from my sight. I hate myself for it. I can only pray that my wife and children do not judge me for my actions, but rather for the end result. A world safe for them to live free and without fear. And I hope that they pray for my soul. May 14th, 2020, Boonville, Indiana. How I miss hot showers. Of all that we have to go without, I sometimes dream of something as simple as standing in a shower as the soothing stream of steamy water pelts my tired muscles. After spending nearly 2 days in the subdivision north of here, I wish I could just take a shower. I feel like I have been to war. Dad and I headed out late in the afternoon on May 12th and set up a base camp near the old firing range we built when I was still a child. 3 6-foot earthen ridges buffered the camp, and we stretched barbed wire across the front of the camp to create a fairly secure compound. We chose that spot for 2 reasons. One, it was close to the northern edge of the property, so we could hunker down quickly if we had to retreat from the subdivision. And 2, some years before we had built an enclosed deer stand on top of one of the ridges, which gave us a good vantage point for both protection and observation. The plan called for assaulting the subdivision at dusk to drive out as many night roamers as we could before nightfall. We would then either retreat to the base camp or create a forward station in one of the houses, depending on the situation. We were prepared to assault the subdivision for 3 days until we completely eradicated the night roamers from the area. I carried 3 firearms into the subdivision: a tactical home defense shotgun we swiped from Goose Creek, my .38 revolver, and my hunting rifle. I also carried my machete and hunting knife. Dad carried his Scorpion and a heavy-handed 50 caliber Desert Eagle semi-automatic pistol. He did not carry a rifle or shotgun, but carried a backpack filled with homemade explosives. On the property line, an old, shaky deer stand leaned against a tree. I carefully climbed the weathered ladder, praying that it would support my weight. I remember this particular deer stand from my youth, so it amazed me that it did not crumble beneath me. It held, and I perched atop the stand, peering out at the subdivision. 20 years ago, I would have been staring out into a cornfield. How times have changed. The sun had yet to set, so I had a clear view of several dozen roamers meandering about, chewing on bones and fighting with one another. Their clothes were tattered and soiled. Some were nearly naked after a month of wearing the same garments. I lined up my first shot and squeezed the trigger. The crack of the rifle's blast echoed out across the subdivision as the roamer I hit, a man gnawing on a human foot, slumped to the ground. As the roamers started to scatter, I started firing at will. The female, clutching a rabbit carcass as she ran, tumbled as my bullet shattered her ribs. A young man, probably a teen, threw back his head and let out a raucous howl. I shot him in the throat, silencing him. With the roamers scurrying to find cover, I climbed down the deer stand and shouldered my rifle. I pumped my shotgun and took off the safety. Dad, who had been standing nearby as a lookout, nodded silently, and we crossed the ditch and entered the subdivision. A few roamers ran screaming toward us, their mouths foaming with fury. Dad gunned them down with a Scorpion. We approached the first house, just on the other side of the ditch, a single-story ranch house with light blue vinyl siding. A basketball goal stood in the driveway. Dad went around to the back door while I took the front. The door was open, so I made my way in. A roamer flung himself at me from the coat closet as I passed. I ducked away from his swinging arm and fired a round of buckshot into his belly. Black blood splattered against the beige wall as he collapsed. I heard 2 gunshots come from the kitchen. I headed down the hall. A roamer tried to jump out the bathroom window, but I shot her in the back. The rest of the house was clear. Returning to the living room, Dad was waiting on me. "Clear," he said flatly. For the next 2 hours, we went from house to house, clearing them of roamers. As night began to fall, we decided to keep pushing the roamers out. We had them on the run. Our drive stalled, however, as we cleared a brick 3-story home at the end of the street. By now it was dark and clouds had moved in, making it difficult to see. We grabbed our tactical lights we found at Goose Creek and fitted them over our heads. I dropped the shotgun back into my extended hip holster and switched to the revolver. I flicked on the laser sight. Likewise, Dad switched to the Desert Eagle with its laser sight. We cleared the brick house of roamers, but as we exited, we saw at least 40 roamers coming in from the northeast. Outnumbered, we retreated into the house and secured our position on the top floor. Throughout the night, as roamers approached, we picked them off. The next morning, yesterday, we left the house and started clearing out the other homes. Running low on ammo and needing something to eat, we withdrew around 10 and returned to base camp. After a quick bite to eat, we restocked our ammunition and headed back to the subdivision. We encountered little resistance until dusk. Another large pack of roamers, between 40 and 50, returned to the area, once again from the northeast. This time, we had enough daylight left to assault the pack. We took up cover positions in a burned-out house and began picking off the roamers as fast as we could. Their sheer numbers started to overwhelm us, and we had to withdraw back to a 2-story home we had cleared earlier that day. If I believed the roamers still had human emotions, I would say that they were angry the way they swarmed the house. They came in so fast we couldn't keep them from getting inside. Even with the night vision scope, I had difficulty keeping them in my crosshairs. As 4 roamers climbed the staircase to the 2nd floor, Dad lit one of his homemade explosives, a nasty little PVC pipe filled with nails and gunpowder. He rolled it down the stairs toward the roamers, and then he and I ducked for cover. A few seconds later, the blast peppered the roamers with nails, ripping one of them nearly in half. The 4 roamers tumbled down the stairs, dead. After 30 minutes of intense fighting, the last roamer fell. It was nearly night, so we headed back to base camp to replenish our supplies for the rest of the night. This morning, we went back to the subdivision at dawn, but we did not see a single live roamer. The subdivision is littered with corpses, all of them already showing signs of decay. We are exhausted. May 17th, 2020, Boonville, Indiana. We've been running lighter patrols after the assault on the subdivision. Since returning, we've only seen 1 night roamer, and we dispatched him easily. It's already hot outside. It nearly got to 90 degrees today. We've not had much rain since the beginning of the month. If we don't get some soon, we might start falling into drought conditions. May 20th, 2020, Boonville, Indiana. Another hot day. Dad dug around in the garage and found an old window air conditioner. We stuck it in the kitchen window. We are rationing the generator's use as we are going through the fuel quickly. We do not turn on the AC until after the sun sets for the day. Otherwise, it's just a waste of gas trying to cool such a large house. There are so little comforts that we enjoy these days. A halfway comfortable house is about the only thing that we have to offer my poor mother. She does not speak much to us anymore. I haven't been sleeping as well. May 25th, 2020, Boonville, Indiana. I have been ill for the past 3 days. Nausea, vomiting, and at one point, 103-degree fever. I don't know if it is the flu or what, but it certainly made me weak. Mom and Dad are a little on edge. None of us have experienced any type of illness since the outbreak began, so I suspect that they are worried I have contracted TBR or whatever they call it. I'm feeling better now, though, so hopefully it was just a run-of-the-mill bug. It's finally raining, which only encourages me to go back to sleep. May 26, 2020, Boonville, Indiana. Not much better today, but managed to hold down a few crackers and some warm broth. I notice that when Dad brings me something to eat or drink, he is packing his Desert Eagle on his hip. He gives me a strange look when he hands me something, like he's hesitant to come into contact with me. May 27th, 2020, Boonville, Indiana. I feel much better this morning. Dad confessed at breakfast that for the past few days he had been sleeping outside my door with his scorpion locked and loaded on the nearby bookshelf, just in case. I thought that would upset me, but for some reason it doesn't. If the roles were reversed, I would probably do the same thing. Now that I am up to par, I'm going to rejoin Dad on the nightly patrols. He brought me up to speed, explaining that it's been fairly quiet. He shot 2 roamers coming down the east hill of the neighbors last night, but hasn't seen any other roamers besides those 2. May 29th, 2020, Boonville, Indiana. We've just about used the last of the gasoline, even siphoning from the Dakota's tank to keep the generator going. Our patrols have continually turned up nothing, so we're encouraged as we prepare for a quick trip into town. After massacring the roamers in the subdivision with Dad's 2 roamer kills from the other day, I'm silently hoping that maybe all of the killings are behind us. I feel sick when I think about all that I've done. The fact that we are still alive is the thing that comforts me. May 30th, 2020, Boonville, Indiana. The state of the city has deteriorated since our last trip. The early summer weeds have encroached on homes, parking lots, and even started sprouting up in cracks in the streets. The Clearwater nursing home sat empty this time around. The roamers must have moved on in search of more food. We thought about returning to Macy's Mart for fuel, but in my haste, I forgot to replace the cover to the storage tank. With the recent rain, we were afraid the gasoline might have been contaminated with runoff. Instead, we went on to a gas station in the middle of town. A light drizzle slowly soaked our clothes as we prepped the garden hose and filled the gas cans. We heard roamers as we filled our gas cans, but never saw them. The tiny convenience store at the gas station had a few supplies that we salvaged. The last time we were at Walmart, we cleaned out almost all of the supplies we thought would be of use, so we decided against returning. I made sure the cover was on the fuel reservoir, and we took off toward the house. We made it home a couple hours ago without incident. I look forward to reading to you again, and I hope that you have enjoyed this selection from the book 2020. Again, I'm Josh Scherrer, author. Have a great day.